The celestial harmony drifted into Earth's orbit like a shining jewel against the blackness of space. Its hull gleamed with unfamiliar metals that caught the sunlight in ways human ships never could. The vessel was not particularly large, but its design spoke of technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. Inside the ship's main chamber, Ambassador Tak straightened his formal attire. The silky blue robes fell around him in precisely arranged folds, marking his status among the Confederation's diplomatic corps. His gray skin had a slight purple tint under the ship's lights as he addressed the 12 members of his delegation. "Today we welcome another species into the galactic community," Tak said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Remember our purpose here. These humans have only just figured out how to travel faster than light. Their first test flight barely crossed their own solar system before returning." Science Officer Min studied the holographic display showing Earth's orbital infrastructure. "Their technology is remarkably primitive, Ambassador. A few small space stations, some satellites, and very limited weapon systems. Nothing that could pose any threat." "As expected," Tak nodded. "We will offer them the standard guidance package. They will need our protection, of course. The galaxy is a dangerous place for young species." The delegation shared knowing looks. This procedure had been performed 17 times before with other emerging civilizations. It always ended the same way. Meanwhile, in the underground command center beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Han watched the alien ship's approach on the massive view screen. Her uniform bore no unnecessary decorations, just the simple rank insignia of Earth's unified defense force. Unlike the aliens, humans had learned long ago that function mattered more than appearance. Secretary General Park stood beside her, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, his posture straight and dignified as befitted Earth's highest political authority. "The Confederation vessel has established standard orbit," reported a young officer. "They're requesting permission to send a shuttle to our orbital station." Park glanced at Han. "Are we still maintaining Protocol Theta?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Protocol Theta had been established 50 years earlier, when humanity first detected signals suggesting intelligent life existed beyond their solar system. It governed every aspect of first contact, including what the aliens would and would not be allowed to discover. "Yes, sir," Admiral Han replied quietly. "The Retribution remains in position behind Jupiter's moon Callisto. Captain Sung reports all systems are nominal but dormant. The Confederation ship has not detected it. The Retribution was humanity's greatest secret, a 5-kilometer-long battleship with weapons capabilities that would shock the visiting aliens. Built over 3 decades using resources mined from the asteroid belt, it had never been revealed to the public. Only a few thousand people knew of its existence." "Let's welcome our visitors," Park said with a tight smile that never reached his eyes, "and see what they really want." Hours later, the reception aboard Earth's largest orbital station proceeded with perfect diplomacy. The human delegation greeted the aliens with carefully rehearsed awe and respect. They asked appropriately naive questions about the Confederation and expressed gratitude for the visit. Ambassador Tak seemed pleased with the deference shown to him. He moved through the reception area gracefully, speaking of peace and cooperation while his science officers wandered the station. "The Confederation wishes only to guide younger species," Tak told Park as they stood before the station's viewport overlooking Earth. "The universe contains many dangers for which you are not prepared. We are fortunate to have found such generous friends," Park replied humbly. What the ambassador didn't notice was the subtle communication device in Park's ear, through which Admiral Han was reporting the activities of the alien science team. "Their officers are scanning our defensive systems," Han whispered in his ear. "They are particularly interested in our weapons capabilities." Park maintained his pleasant expression. "We would be grateful for any protection the Confederation might offer," he told Tak. "Earth has always dreamed of peaceful relations with other worlds." In the shadows of the Jupiter system, the massive form of the Retribution floated silently, its weapons and engines dormant but ready. Captain Sung sat in his command chair, watching the diplomatic feed from Earth Station. Like everyone else who knew of the ship's existence, he understood what was really happening. First contact was rarely about friendship. It was about power. And Earth had been preparing for this moment for generations. The morning of the third day began like the others. The humans continued their act of wide-eyed wonder at the Confederation's technology. Ambassador Tak seemed pleased with himself as he described the many benefits of accepting their protection. His delegation nodded in perfect harmony whenever he emphasized a point. Lieutenant G's morning had started differently. The young officer monitored the deep space array from her post when unusual readings appeared on her screen. She checked the data 3 times before believing what she saw. 6 large ships had just entered the outer edge of the solar system. They moved in perfect formation, their energy signatures matching known Confederation warship patterns. Ji's heart raced as she ran through the underground complex. She ignored proper protocols, bypassing the chain of command completely. This information couldn't wait. She reached Admiral Han's private quarters and knocked urgently. "Enter," came Han's voice from inside. Ji stepped into the room, her uniform slightly disheveled from her run. Admiral Han looked up from her desk with surprise. The Admiral rarely received visitors in her quarters. "Lieutenant, what's happened?" "Admiral," Ji said, struggling to catch her breath. "Deep Space Monitoring has detected a Confederation battle group entering the Kuiper Belt." 6 heavy warships, ma'am." Han's face changed instantly. The polite diplomatic mask she had worn for days vanished, replaced by the hard expression of a military commander who had just confirmed her suspicions. "So much for peaceful intentions," she said coldly. "I knew their talk of protection was just a cover." She stood up from her desk, straightening her uniform. "Alert the Secretary General immediately. Then contact Commander Sung on the Retribution. Tell him to prepare all systems for full activation." Ji nodded and turned to leave, but Han stopped her. "Lieutenant," the Admiral said quietly, "I believe it's time we stopped playing the naive newcomers." Ji smiled grimly. "Yes, Mom. It will be good to finally drop the act." On the orbital station, the diplomatic meeting continued in the large conference room. The human delegates sat on one side of the table, the Confederation representatives on the other. Holographic displays showed various trade and protection agreements that Ambassador Tak was explaining in great detail. "These protection protocols have worked perfectly for 17 other developing species," Tak said, his tone growing more condescending by the minute. "The Confederation fleet will establish a permanent presence in your system. This is for your own safety, of course." Secretary General Park nodded politely, asking appropriately naive questions about the arrangements. The other human delegates took notes and appeared suitably impressed. It was a convincing performance. Park felt his wrist communicator vibrate silently against his skin. He waited for a natural pause in Tak's speech before glancing down at the message. The small screen displayed 5 simple words. "Sunflower Protoki Olo authorized." Park's heart beat faster, but his face revealed nothing. Sunflower Protocol had been established decades ago for exactly this situation. It meant that the Confederation had shown its true intentions, and humanity could finally reveal its true capabilities. Ambassador Tak continued his explanation, unaware of the message. "Once your system is properly secured, we can begin introducing your people to appropriate technologies. Nothing too advanced at first, of course. Young species must develop at a careful pace." "Ambassador," Park interrupted politely, raising his hand. "Before we continue these discussions about Confederation protection, perhaps we should introduce you to our escort vessel." Tak stopped mid-sentence, his facial ridges, thin strips of cartilage that ran along his cheekbones, fluttered in confusion. This physical reaction was the equivalent of a human raising their eyebrows in surprise. "Escort vessel," he repeated. "Our scan showed only this station and a few primitive satellites." The other Confederation delegates exchanged puzzled looks. Science Officer Min quickly consulted her data pad, her fingers moving rapidly across its surface. There must be some translation error, Tak said. Your species has no significant space vessels. Certainly nothing that could be called an escort. Park smiled. It was not the humble, deferential smile he had been using for the past 2 days. This smile carried confidence and perhaps a hint of satisfaction. Yes, we thought your scans might miss it, Park said calmly. If you'd all look toward Jupiter, please. Park gestured toward the large viewing window that formed one wall of the conference room. The gas giant Jupiter was clearly visible, its massive form dominating that portion of space. I don't understand, Tak said, his confusion growing. What are we supposed to see? Just wait, Park replied. The show is about to begin. The viewing window automatically dimmed as a new light source appeared near Jupiter. At first, it looked like nothing more than a small flare against the gas giant's swirling clouds. Then the flare grew, expanding into a distinct shape that emerged from behind the massive planet. Running lights activated in sequence along the vessel's hull, revealing its true size. 5 kilometers from bow to stern, the ship dwarfed anything humans had publicly acknowledged building. Its dark hull absorbed rather than reflected light, except for strategic illumination that emphasized its massive weapons arrays. What is that? Ambassador Tak whispered, his confidence evaporating instantly. The EDF Retribution moved with surprising grace for something so enormous. Its main engines ignited fully, creating a blue corona of energy that pushed the massive vessel forward. The ship's movement was deliberate and unhurried, like a predator that knows its prey cannot escape. Secretary General Park stood calmly beside the shocked ambassador. That, Ambassador Tak, is the Earth Defense Force Battleship Retribution. On the bridge of the Retribution, Commander Sung sat in the central command chair. The massive bridge hummed with activity as systems that had been dormant for months came fully online. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency at their stations. All systems show green, reported the operations officer, weapons and defensive shields at full capacity. Sung nodded. Open a channel to the approaching Confederation fleet. Let's see if they still want to offer us their protection. Back on the Celestial Harmony, the Confederation delegation rushed to the main viewing port. Science Officer Min frantically operated her scanning device, shaking her head in disbelief at the readings. Impossible, she whispered. The weapons capacity. The energy readings. This ship outclasses our entire approaching battle group. Ambassador Tak's usual composure had completely vanished. His facial ridges lay flat against his face, a sign of extreme stress in his species. When did you build this? Secretary General Park's voice remained casual, as if they were discussing the weather. The Retribution was commissioned 73 years ago. She's actually scheduled for modernization next year. 73 years, gasped another Confederation delegate. But your species only achieved faster than light travel recently. Yes, Park agreed with a small smile. We decided to focus on other technologies first. We found defense to be particularly important to develop before announcing ourselves to the galaxy. The communication system crackled to life. Commander Sung's confident voice filled both the conference room and simultaneously reached the approaching Confederation battle group. Confederation Battle Group, this is the Earth Defense Force Battleship Retribution. We notice your vessels have entered our solar system unannounced. Please state your intentions or reverse course immediately. The message was polite but firm. There was no mistaking the implied threat. On the view screen, they could see the 6 Confederation warships suddenly halt their advance. Their formation shifted slightly, as if the ships were uncertain whether to continue forward or retreat. Ambassador Tak fumbled for his communication device. This is Ambassador Tak. There must be some misunderstanding. Our battle group is merely a standard escort. An escort that you failed to mention in our diplomatic discussions, Park noted. Just as we failed to mention our own escort vessel. The Retribution continued its approach, its massive form now clearly visible to everyone in the solar system. Additional running lights activated along its hull, illuminating weapon ports that began to open in sequence. The display was deliberately intimidating. "Perhaps we should continue our diplomatic discussions with all cards on the table," Park suggested. "Our scans show your battle group outguns anything we've publicly displayed. Your ships would have easily overwhelmed our orbital defenses had we not revealed the retribution." Tak struggled to regain his composure. "This is highly irregular. A species at your development stage should not possess such technology. And yet we do," Park replied simply. On the view screen, they could see the 6 Confederation warships suddenly halt their advance. Their formation shifted slightly, as if the ships were uncertain whether to continue forward or retreat. Ambassador Take fumbled for his communication device. This is Ambassador Tak. There must be some misunderstanding. Our battle group is merely a standard escort. An escort that you failed to mention in our diplomatic discussions," Park noted, "just as we failed to mention our own escort vessel." The Retribution continued its approach, its massive form now clearly visible to everyone in the solar system. Additional running lights activated along its hull, illuminating weapon ports that began to open in sequence. The display was deliberately intimidating. "Perhaps we should continue our diplomatic discussions with all cards on the table," Park suggested. "Our scans show your battle group outguns anything we've publicly displayed. Your ships would have easily overwhelmed our orbital defenses had we not revealed the retribution." Tak struggled to regain his composure. "This is highly irregular. A species at your development stage should not possess such technology. And yet we do," Park replied simply. On the main viewing screen, they could see the Confederation battle group changing formation again. Frantic communications flashed between the diplomatic vessel and the warships. The delegates spoke rapidly in their native language, apparently forgetting that the human translation systems could understand them. "The battle group commander wants permission to withdraw," one delegate said urgently. "If we retreat now, we lose all credibility," another argued. Ambassador Tak seemed caught between anger and fear. "Tell them to hold position, but take no aggressive action." The Retribution continued its approach, its engines glowing brighter as it accelerated slightly. The message was clear. The human ship could reach the Confederation battle group long before they could flee the solar system. "I believe," Secretary General Park said gently, "that it's time we discussed a different type of relationship between Earth and the Confederation. One based on mutual respect rather than protection." Ambassador Tak looked at the human with new eyes. The condescension was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like fear. The emergency meeting convened 3 hours later in the station's largest conference room. The mood had changed completely. Gone was the polite fiction of a superior civilization, welcoming a primitive one into the galactic community. Now representatives from both sides sat across from each other like equals. Admiral Han stood at the head of the table. Her uniform, previously hidden beneath civilian clothes during the earlier diplomatic meetings, now displayed her full rank and decorations. She touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the table. "You must understand," Admiral Han explained, her voice calm but firm. "Humanity has always prepared for the possibility that our first contact might not be peaceful." The hologram showed a timeline of Earth's military development. It began with the early space programs of the 20th century and continued through to the present day. Key points were highlighted: the first orbital defense platforms, the lunar shipyards, the asteroid mining operations, and finally, the construction of the Retribution. While we focused on developing our planetary defenses and solar system infrastructure, we deliberately kept our FTL research moving slowly. We wanted to be ready when we finally announced ourselves to the galaxy. Ambassador Tak studied the timeline with new respect. His earlier composure had returned somewhat, though his grayish skin had taken on a paler shade. The other Confederation delegates looked similarly subdued. "Our history is filled with stories of more advanced civilizations encountering less developed ones," Secretary General Park added. "These encounters rarely ended well for the less developed society. We decided not to take that chance." "You developed weapons of this magnitude before achieving faster-than-light travel?" Tak asked, his voice betraying his disbelief. The Confederation has never encountered such paranoia. Admiral Han's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened slightly. "We call it prudence," Secretary General Park corrected gently. "Given recent events, I believe our caution was justified." The hologram shifted to show the 6 Confederation warships that had entered the solar system. They remained at the edge of the system, now under the watchful eyes of the Retribution. "Now, shall we discuss the actual purpose of your battle group? The one that was approaching while you spoke of peace." The conference room grew very quiet. The Confederation delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ambassador Tak seemed to be having an internal debate about how to respond. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "It is standard protocol," he admitted. "Species new to interstellar travel are given the opportunity to accept Confederation protection and guidance. Those who refuse—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Are subjugated," Admiral Han completed flatly. Tak didn't deny it. "How many other young species are currently under such protection?" Admiral Han asked. Science Officer Min looked down at the table, avoiding eye contact with the humans. 17, she admitted in a whisper. Park leaned forward, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. "So the Confederation finds developing worlds, offers them protection they don't need, and then effectively takes control when they refuse. You don't understand the dangers of the galaxy," Tak said, some of his earlier confidence returning. "There are predatory species that would destroy your civilization without a second thought. The Confederation offers genuine protection." "At what cost?" Admiral Han asked. "Complete submission to your authority. Resource extraction rights. Military bases in our system." Tak's silence was answer enough. The hologram changed again, showing the Retribution in all its massive glory. Additional information appeared, revealing weapon systems and defensive capabilities that made several Confederation delegates gasp. "The Retribution is just one ship," Admiral Han said quietly. "We have 3 more like it nearing completion in the shipyards of Callisto." This was not entirely true. The other ships were still years from completion, but the Confederation delegates didn't need to know that. "Our FTL test flight was not our first attempt," Park added. "It was simply the first one we allowed you to detect. We wanted to see what would happen when the galaxy noticed us." Ambassador Tak looked at the humans with new understanding. "You set a trap," he said slowly. "You wanted us to come." Admiral Han smiled thinly. "We hoped for peaceful contact. We prepared for the alternative." "What happens now?" Tak asked. Secretary General Park's expression softened slightly. "Now we negotiate as equals, not as protector and protected. Earth is willing to join the galactic community, but on our terms." "The Confederation Council will never agree to this," one of the delegates protested. Admiral Han's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I believe they will when they see what happens to protection fleets that enter our territory uninvited." A hologram shifted one final time to show the Retribution moving into position between Earth and the Confederation battle group. The message was clear. Humanity would not be intimidated, subjugated, or protected against its will. The age of human isolation was over. The era of human galactic influence had begun. The final negotiations would not take place on Earth or on the Confederation diplomatic vessel. Instead, humanity chose to make a point. The talks would happen aboard the Retribution itself. Ambassador Tak and 5 key members of his delegation boarded a human shuttle that carried them to the massive battleship. The trip took nearly an hour, emphasizing just how far the vessel was from Earth. This distance was another revelation. The humans had maintained the ship far from their homeworld to keep it hidden. As they passed through the Retribution's massive docking bay, even the most composed delegates could not hide their awe. The internal space could have held their entire diplomatic vessel with room to spare. Crew members moved with purpose, paying little attention to the visitors. This was not a show put on for their benefit. This was the normal operation of a fully functional warship. Commander Sung personally met them at the airlock. His uniform was simple but impeccable, with just a small Earth Defense Force insignia on the collar. He bowed slightly to the delegation. "Welcome aboard the EDF Retribution," he said. "Please follow me to the conference room." The corridors seemed endless. They passed weapon control centers, crew quarters, and engineering sections. At one point, they walked across an observation deck that gave a view of one of the main gun batteries. The weapon was larger than any ship in the Confederation's approaching battle group. "How many crew members serve on this vessel?" asked Science Officer Min, breaking the uncomfortable silence. 8,342, Sung replied casually, plus another 2,000 support staff. Ambassador Tak struggled to hide his shock. The Confederation's largest vessels carried crews of under 1,000. The conference room was surprisingly simple. A large table dominated the center, with Earth officials already seated on one side. Admiral Han and Secretary General Park sat in the middle, with various military and civilian leaders flanking them. Once everyone was seated, Park activated a holographic display showing a complex document. He then placed a small crystal data storage device on the table and slid it toward Ambassador Tak. "We've prepared a new treaty," Secretary General Park explained. "Earth will join the Confederation, but as a sovereign power with full voting rights. Additionally, we'll be conducting independent reviews of these protection arrangements with other species." Tak picked up the crystal, but didn't insert it into his reader right away. "The Confederation Council will never agree," he began. "They will," Admiral Han interrupted, her voice leaving no room for argument, "because the alternative is less appealing. Our fleet is already being assembled. The Retribution is merely our oldest battleship." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If the Retribution was their oldest ship, what else might humanity have hidden? "You must understand our position," Tak said finally. "The Confederation has maintained stability for over 800 years. Your arrival changes things." "Change was inevitable," Park replied gently. "But it can be changed for the better. Earth doesn't seek to dominate or control. We simply refuse to be dominated or controlled." "And the 17 protected species?" Admiral Han asked. Tak sighed deeply. "That will be complicated." "We're good at complicated," Commander Sung said with a small smile. 3 months passed quickly. The initial shock of humanity's revelation rippled through the Confederation like a stone dropped in still water. Emergency sessions of the Council debated, argued, and eventually came to the only possible conclusion. Earth could not be treated like previous emerging civilizations. On the bridge of the Retribution, Commander Sung stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the Confederation diplomatic vessel prepared to depart Earth orbit. Beside him, Lieutenant G monitored communications. The ship looked different now. New markings adorned its hull, signs of the historic agreement that had been reached. It would carry not just Confederation diplomats, but also Earth's first official representatives to the galactic government. "The joint delegation has boarded and reports ready for departure," Jai reported. Sung nodded. "Signal our readiness to escort them to the jump point." Jai hesitated before asking the question that many on Earth were wondering. "Do you think it will hold, this new arrangement?" Sung considered the question carefully. The past months had been filled with tense negotiations, threats both veiled and direct, and finally, a compromise that neither side had initially wanted. "It will," he replied with confidence, "because we didn't just show them our strength, we showed them our restraint." The Retribution's engines glowed blue as the massive ship accelerated alongside the much smaller diplomatic vessel. Together, they moved toward the edge of the solar system, where they would make the jump to faster-than-light travel. Across the galaxy, news spread rapidly. On 17 worlds that had been under protection, beings of various forms gathered around communication devices to hear the unprecedented announcement. The Confederation's policy of mandatory protection was being reviewed. Independent committees, including representatives from Earth, would assess each arrangement. For the first time in centuries, change was coming to the galactic order. Humanity had arrived, not as another subject species, but as something the Confederation had never encountered before, a young civilization that had prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. As the Retribution escorted the diplomatic mission beyond the orbit of Neptune, Admiral Han sent a final message to Commander Sung. Mission accomplished. The real work begins now. Sung smiled as he read it. Humanity's first steps into the wider galaxy have been cautious ones. Their next steps would reshape it. The end.